There's going to be a surprising amount of 5-star reads in this month's wrap up. Hi everyone, my name is Chloe, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for being here today. Today's video is going to be my August reading wrap up. August was a strange month. For anyone who didn't see my TBR, I had a punishment pick in there, which I will get to in a minute, but I was terrified because that book is chunky, so I thought I was not going to be able to read much at all this month, and then it ended up being my second best month of the year reading wise, but also my best month in terms of rating wise, because there was a lot of 5-star reads. Some of them were rereads, so I was about to say I wasn't expecting them. Some of them I was, obviously, they were rereads, but some of them just came out of nowhere, and I'm very happy about it. So without further ado, let's just start talking about the books that I read this month. I feel like I'm not really prepared for this video and I've got no idea why. I've got all my stats, I'm ready to go. It just feels like there's something else I normally say, but it's a wrap up. What else do you need to know? So we'll start off with stats. I read 13 books in the month of August, which is, like I said, the second best for any so far in the year. The most I've read in one month was in June when I read 19. I did read a lot of graphic novels then though. I did also read a lot of short books this month, which you will see again in a minute. But still, 13 is a very good number, especially when you consider some of the chunkers that I read this month, which again we'll get to in a minute. In terms of total pages, I read 5,709, which again that is just under June's reading because that one was 6,300. So basically if I was reading one book at the end of the month, I'm not counting on this month. I've counted it for my TBR purposes, but because I made a decent chunk into it, but I've not counted it for stats purposes. If I'd have finished that, I'd have been on par with June page wise because of the bigger books that I read. It means that I read a total of 184 pages per day, which is way over the 100 goal that I set myself, and it does mean that for the year I'm at 157 pages per day, which is fantastic. I've also got a new stat that I haven't tracked before, and it is the average pages per book. So the average amount of pages per book this time was 439, which is medium for how much I read. Some months it's been 500 and something, some months it's 300 and something. It's very all over the place, but I just thought I'd check that. I wanted to see sort of at the end of the year what my average page count per book was. For the formats this month, we do have a few more ebooks than usual. We've got 3 ebooks, 1 fully audiobook, 4 which is a mixture, and then 5 physical reads. The reason for that is that I read a load of arcs in August, which again I will get onto in a minute, but I did a week of just reading arcs, so they were all ebooks pretty much, so that added to that being higher than usual. I think that's the most it's the second most ebooks I've read in a month, because I read a lot of library ebooks in June for the comics that I was reading for Marvelathon. Age range this month has definitely gone more one way than the other. We had 2 young adult books and then 11 adult books, so just where I'm at with my reading at the minute, it does tend to be more and more adult books, but this month it's definitely jumped a lot higher than usual in that direction. And then the last thing we have is our star ratings, which, like I said, a surprising amount of 5 stars. We have got 1 3-star, 4 4-stars, and then 8 5-star reads, which puts my average rating for the month at 4.54. Now that isn't actually the highest rated month that I've had. I have had a month where I've had more 5 stars, maybe less 3 stars. I don't know. I had a month where I read less books and had less 4 and 3 stars. So yeah, for how many books I read, that being my average rating is very, very good. I'm feeling happy about what I read this month. So let's just start talking you through the actual books, shall we? Now I am going to say up front, some of these feel like I read them a lifetime ago, so my thoughts maybe not the most coherent. When we get towards the end, I have definite thoughts to give you, but at the beginning, we'll try. I'm very sorry if it's not the best wrap up in the world. We're gonna try. So the first book that I read in the month of August was actually one that I was finishing at the end of July, and I think I said in that one that I'd insert a clip if I managed to finish it, and then I never did. So that book is The Intimacy Experiment by Rosie Dannon. This is the second book in a companion series, the first one being The Roommate. It follows the best friend of one of the characters from the first book, and best friend and business partner, and it's hard to explain what it's about without kind of giving things away, because I actually think the series is really good if you don't really know too much about it going into it. But it is an adult romance. It's about 2 characters, one called Naomi. Her job is it says on the back it's centered around a sex positive startup company, and she wants to get more into teaching, but she's finding the doors are a bit closed to her when she's trying to branch out a little bit. And then the other character, Ethan, is a young rabbi, and he is trying to bring more people to his synagogue and trying to get sort of and tried to like open the doors to kind of a new variety of people coming through. So he decides to invite Naomi to come and do some talks, but they don't necessarily go down well with the other people that organise the synagogue. And it's just kind of about what happens when they start this series of like lectures and their relationship that grows. And I really liked this book. I think I actually preferred it to The Roommate in a way. Like parts of it I didn't. I feel like I wanted a little bit more from the romance. It felt like once they'd actually got together, because that's not a spoiler, you know they're gonna get together. Once they actually had, it felt like it kind of jumped through time very quickly, and it was like, oh, now they've been together for like 2 weeks and we didn't really see much of them together. I would have liked more of that, but the actual characters and the actual romance in there I preferred. I really like the two main characters in this. I will be reading from Rosie Dan, and again I've liked both of her books that I've read now, so yeah, a solid 4-star read. I'm very happy that I read it, very happy that I read The Roommate the other month as well. We're doing well. Next up we have two that I'm going to talk about together because they are volumes 1 and 2 in a series. One of them is a reread, one of them is a new read, but I will say that the reread has gone up in ratings since I last read it. They are Lore Olympus volume 1 and volume 2. So volume 2 I just received recently. I thought I should probably reread volume 1 before I read it, because although I didn't read it that long ago, I just felt like I didn't remember the specifics of where we were in the story. So yeah, decided to give it a reread, and it ended up being that when I read this one, I gave it 4 stars originally. I just felt like I wanted a little bit more from the story. When I read them together, because it was like a longer amount of the story, I ended up giving them both 5 stars because I loved them. For anyone who doesn't know, Lore Olympus is a Hades and Persephone's retelling. It is a graphic novel. It is absolutely beautiful. There is some stunning artwork in here. Just look, like that's just one page I randomly opened to, and look how pretty it is. It is set sort of in the mythical world. There is the underworld and things like that, but also it's like a modern twist to it as well. Like it's also kind of set within like a modern city as well, and I just really love this take on it. There are some trigger warnings in here, so be careful if you're going into it and you're not sure what they are. Greek myth retellings are always going to have trigger warnings. They weren't the nicest stories really, they weren't the nicest people or gods really, but no, I really love this, and I'm very excited for volume 3. I know I could just read a lot more of it online, but I like the binds up for these, whereas like with Heartstopper for example, I do tend to read those online. I'm fine with it. With these, I think they actually work really well being on page, because like I said, those illustrations are beautiful and I just want to take them in like in all the glory. But yeah, I really liked this series, so both are 5 stars. We've got our first 2 5 stars of the month. I'm going to tell you now, we're on a run of 5 stars really. So the next one is another one where actually it benefited from being sort of a second part in the story, and that is A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers. I read Song for the Wild Built earlier this year, I think it was, and I gave that one 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, but again, just with it being a novella, I struggle with them sometimes because I want more from them. This one, because I already knew the characters and I adored the characters, it meant that I was set up to enjoy this one a lot more, and I gave this one 5 stars. This is about a tea monk called Sibling Dex. It's kind of like a cozy sci-fi. It's a world where there were robots and they kind of left the human race to fend for themselves, thinking that something bad was going to happen because humans, we don't do that well. And then one day the robots decide to come back and make contact, and they have one simple question to ask everyone, and that's, what do you need? So this is about a robot called Mosscap who starts interacting with the humans and kind of figuring out more of where they're at and what's happened. And this second book is really a lot about like him interacting with the wider world. In the first book he just interacts with Sibling Dex. Sibling Dex, they go out on a journey and sort of meet Mosscap in the first one, and then this one is like just a bit more of the actual interactions with everyone else as well, and I really loved it. I don't know if there's going to be more in this series. There definitely could be, but also it could end at this one. I would love for there to be more because I just love these characters with my whole heart. I really love this. I think if I reread the first one, I'd probably give it 5 stars. And then our next 5-star read is The King is Dead by Benjamin Dean. This one I read because, well, I was interested in it anyway, but Becca Vowell has in particular been telling me that I'm going to love this book, and she was not wrong. Actually, my signed version, because I got it signed at Yalk, does say, to Chloe, enjoy, listen to Becca. I did. I really, really loved it. It's a royalty story. I do love a good royalty story. It is about a young prince who ends up becoming king when his father dies quite suddenly. And once that happens, there ends up being some blackmail happening because he has some secrets. Number one being that he is gay. And yeah, it's about figuring out who is blackmailing the king and what's going to happen with there being a gay king of England and whether or not that's going to come out and all of this. And it's just a fun ride. There's like a kind of Gossip Girl, Pretty Little Liars type vibe to it because there are these like notes that keep appearing. And yeah, it was just fun. I think at one point I did think I was going to give this 4 stars, and then it got towards the end with all the reveals and things, and I was just like, I am loving this so much. I was just very, very much invested in it. So yeah, it ended up being a 5-star, and I'm very, very happy that I read it. I've read another book by this author before. I read Me, My Dad and the End of the Rainbow, and I gave that one 4 stars because I enjoyed it, but it's a middle grade, which is not necessarily something that I tend to give 5 stars too easily because I'm not the target audience for it. I'm not necessarily the target audience for this. It's a YA, but it's more the type of book that I am likely to give 5 stars to. So yeah, very, very happy that I read this. Happy that I've read something else by this author, because I did say when I read Me, My Dad and the End of the Rainbow, if you write something older, I'll probably give it 5 stars, and lo and behold, I did. Okay, we're gonna go on to some books that I don't actually have now because I had, like I said, a week of reading ARC. I participated in ARC August, which Tori had done a challenge for, and I managed to actually complete all of the prompts with these books, and I have done a vlog where I've talked through what each of them are. Right now I cannot remember them and I can't reach anything to find the graphic, so we're just gonna, if you want to find out what each of the prompts of it, go back and watch that ARC reading all ARCs vlog. It's fine. But the first one I read was Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. Now if you've watched my channel all recently, you'll know that I do not shut up about R.F. Kuang books. There's going to be another one of hers coming up in a minute. Yes, it is the one you're thinking of. Yes, I have already reread it. But Yellowface is her next book, which comes out next May, so there's quite a wait for this one yet. It's a very interesting book and it's so different from anything she's done before. Everything she's done before has had some sort of fantasy element to it. Not this one. It is a contemporary, which I actually went to watch her speak the other day about about Babel, her new release, and she also explained a little bit about this one, and she said it's like reading a Twitter flame war in a book format, and I'm like, I love this. It's a very good description of it. Basically, it is about 2 authors, one called June and one called Athena. They are in the same class at college. They kind of start in the publishing world at the same time, having very different trajectories. June's book comes out, doesn't really do too well, kind of gets forgotten about. She's a struggling author at the start of the book. Athena, on the other hand, is sort of deemed a prodigy and her book sells really well. It gets all the press and publicity, and June's maybe a little bit resentful about it. Then what happens is Athena ends up dying in a freak accident, and June is there and she stumbles across the manuscript and decides to publish it under her own name. One of the major issues with this, other than just stealing someone else's work, is the fact that June is a white woman and Athena is an Asian American author, and the storyline and the story that is being written about is a Chinese story. So there is this whole issue of who has the right to tell different people's stories. There is also just like conversations about the publishing world in general, about sort of book Twitter and social media, and how like cancel culture as well. There's just so many like little conversations in this that are so interesting. I want to reread it already. I'm going to wait until I get a physical copy, which is going to be a while yet. I mean, if I could get my hands on a physical ARC, I would love it so much, but I know they've all already been sent out and I'm not getting one of those now. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed this book. It's definitely different to anything she has written before. And the style of writing is completely different as well. But the conversations are just as interesting, if not more so in a way. And yeah, I'm very, very happy that I was able to get an e-arc of this one and read it, and I can't wait for it to actually come out next year when I can start shouting at people about it like I have done with Babel, whatever you want to call it. We'll get on to that one in a minute. But yeah, 5 stars, obviously. Then for the next book that I read, I ended up doing a try a chapter tag, and surprising actually what I ended up picking up from this. The first one was Daria Blood by S.T. Gibson. Is that the right name? I always forget her name. 1 second. It is S.T. Gibson. So that's the first one I ended up picking up. And I had put sort of 2 fantasies up against each other, a YA fantasy and an adult fantasy. Now, and I fully expected to pick the YA fantasy because it was one of my most anticipated reads. Turns out I still haven't read that one yet. But I did pick up a Daria Blood because I was just very invested in it very early on. It's a Dracula retelling. It's actually about one of Dracula's brides, and it is told in like diary format. Well, it's kind of told in like a letter to Dracula actually, and it's just this really beautiful like lyrical writing, and it's talking a lot about like abusive relationships, but then also kind of healing within that as well, and finding support from other people in similar situations. And but it is also a vampire book. It's a hard one to explain, but like I said, it was very, very beautiful. I couldn't understand the hype for this one now, because basically this was a self-published or indie published book earlier on this year. I think it was last year. And it got a load of hype, and now you can't find the indie published version because it has been picked up by a traditional publisher, and that's where I got the ARC from, and it is coming out later on this year, I believe. I don't like the cover for the new one, which is upsetting because now I really love the book and I'm going to have to get the cover that I don't like because it's the only one I can get. But no, I can see why the hype. I can see why it was picked up by a traditional publisher. I think she's writing another book in this world. I keep seeing her put something on Twitter about a companion book to it, so I'm going to have to look into that more. But I'm very, very excited for whatever she writes next. It was just, like I said, a beautiful book. That's the only way I can describe it. Just, I didn't want to put it down. I read it really, really quickly, and yeah, not the sort of vampire book I expected, but one I really, really enjoyed. And I don't know if I said, but I gave that one 5 stars as well. Continuing on with my try a chapter video that I did, I read 2 more ARCs. I read some more contemporary, although I will say this one does have a fantasy twist to it, but I read 2 more like contemporary romances, and this is the one that I did expect to pick to read actually. So this was The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. Ashley Poston I previously read from, she wrote the Once Upon a Con series, which is a YA series that is all romances set around Comic-Con. I adore that series. Like, it's not the best series in the world, but it's so fun. And I was hoping that I would enjoy her adult romance, and I did. So this one is about a woman who is a ghostwriter for this big name romance author, but she is feeling a little bit disillusioned with love herself. She's recently gone through a breakup and it's messed her up a little bit, and she goes into a new editor, doesn't have the best experience when she tells him that she's struggling to write, and they don't get on from the off. Then the next day he shows up on her doorstep as a ghost, because she can see ghosts, and it is basically about her trying to kind of help him move on to wherever he needs to move on, but it is also a romance between her and the ghost. But I'm not going to explain any more about that and what goes on from there, because I know a lot of people are like, can this have a happy ending? I'm not going to explain. I will say that it's not actually just a fluffy romance story. There is actually a strong theme of grief in this. There is a death of a family member that is very, very important in the storyline, and I would say more so than the romance, to be honest. And it was just a really well done book, to be honest. It was a nice mixture of this sort of more tragic, sad storyline that was going on with the family, and then this relationship that was happening as well, because it was a really, really cute relationship how it was done, and it was also fun at the same time, even though it was a little bit sad. It was just a very nice mixture of things, and I very, very much enjoyed it. It did remind me of, did anyone watch the rom-com Just Like Heaven with Reese Witherspoon and Matt Ruffalo in it? Because that one is also like a romance between somebody who is dead and somebody who's not, and I really enjoyed that film, so it's not a bad thing that it reminded me of it. But yeah, I had a really good time reading this one, and once again I gave it 5 stars. That is actually the end of the 5 stars. Spoiler alert for the next one, but that is the end of the 5 stars for now. It's the end of this run of 5 stars, because the next book that I read was never going to be 5 stars. We know this. I did hope, and to be honest, I had a pretty good time reading it, but it was also a lot of effort. This is a punishment book I had to read, of course it is. Let me just pick it up, because I'm not picking it up until I absolutely have to, because it's basically a weight. So I read Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. So I talk about theatre a lot. If you're new to this channel, hi, you will basically always find me at a theatre if I am not reading. It's just what I do. I have seen Les Mis a few times. By a few, I mean 23. It's my favourite musical. Well, I've been having this debate the whole time. I'm not going to get into that. It's one of my favourite musicals. It's this or it's Rent, but anyway, we'll get into that another time. It's one of my favourite musicals. It's a musical I've seen the most, and I have been trying to read this book since 2010, I think it is, that I bought it. It's the first time that I went to see it. I know this because my bookmark in this is a picture of Nick Jonas from Camp Rock, because when I first went to see it, Nick Jonas was in it. And that was like, yeah, 2010. And that's actually where I got up to when I read it in 2010. My other bookmark in here actually was a ticket from when I went to see it back in 2010. So yeah, we're giving you an idea of when it was. And I struggled to get through it because whilst it does obviously tell the story of Les Mis that I know of, there is also a lot of extra stuff to do with backstory, which I did also very much enjoy. But there is also a lot of unnecessary things in here. So for anyone who doesn't know, the basic storyline of Les Mis is that you have a character called Jean Valjean who steals a loaf of bread to help feed his sister and his sister's family. He gets arrested for it. He ends up spending 19 years in jail, 5 years for what he's done, the rest because he tried to run. Yes, 24601. Sorry, I'm just quoting song lyrics at you now. But he ends up spending time in jail, and when he gets out he finds that he is not sort of treated like the other citizens are, so he ends up breaking his parole and setting up a new life for himself. And it's kind of about that and the police officer that is chasing him, but it's also about lots of other people that he meets along the way and just sort of life at this time and how different people were struggling with it, particularly people in poverty. And particularly people in poverty, there is a whole uprising part of this book as well. It's very hard to explain like a simple storyline of Les Mis, but the main thing is that you follow Jean Valjean throughout his life. And all of that stuff I really, really enjoyed. There was some really like beautiful extra stuff about the students and things like that. Like Gavroche got more of a backstory, Eponine got more of a backstory. All my favourites just got more to them, and I loved that so much. But there was also like a 30-page section about chairs, and there was a 40-page section about the sewers. When none of the characters were in the sewers, it was literally just explaining the sewage system of Paris to me. There was also a long section about slang words, which again was like a whole chunk with no characters in it, just explaining how language works to me. And there's another book I'm going to talk about in a minute that's talking about language, but it did it in a way that still kept you invested in the story. This one, not so much. So basically, what I'm saying is when it was good, it was amazing. When it was bad, it was very bad. It could have done with just being a shorter version. I think an abridged version of this would be fine to read because it would probably cut out all of that unnecessary stuff that we're not really needing. But I gave it 4 stars still because, like I said, when it was good, it was so good. And the actual storyline in this is fantastic. I mean, there's a reason why it's been made into a musical that I love so much. There's a reason why that musical has been running for so long. It is a very, very good storyline. It's just execution could have been tweaked just a little bit, but 4 stars. 4 stars is still good. I then picked up a book that I've had for quite a while and just never got around to reading. And I only picked it up because it was a book club pick for a podcast that I was on. I will link it down below. It's Barely Adulting. It is hosted by my lovely friends Lisa and Jem. And they invited me on as their first guest, which I felt very, very honoured to do. So thank you once again for that. Unfortunately, it was my lowest rated book of the month. I'm very sorry about that, but I think we all had very similar opinions, to be honest. It was Into the Crooked Place by Alexandra Christo. I really wanted to love this because I really love To Kill a Kingdom by this author. I will read this author's next book, which is in the same world as To Kill a Kingdom, but this one was just a bit meh. It's like a heist book. It's basically, I'm gonna struggle to tell you a synopsis of it, to be honest, because I've already forgotten about it and I read it last week. But it's about 4 main characters, and I believe they're trying to overthrow like the current crime lord in their city. There is magic involved as well. I remember they have to go on a journey to do the thing that they need to do. They end up on a train for a lot of it. And yeah, I'm going to read you the synopsis. It's probably better than I am. So, the streets of Kreischer for Deadly and the Dreamers, but 4 crooks know just how much magic they need up their sleeve to survive. Tavia sells dark charms and potions until she can escape the city. Wesley does whatever it takes to further his criminal empire. Karam has a deadly name for herself in the fighting rings, and Saxony plots revenge on the people who destroyed her family. After a sinister new magic hits the streets, these 4 outsiders must come together to save their city before it's too late. But with enemies at all sides, they can trust nobody, at least at all each other. Yeah, it's basically, yeah, they're trying to take down this bad sort of magic that is on the streets, and they go on a bit of a quest to do it. and I was just a bit bored. I didn't find myself like particularly connected to any of the characters, and yeah, I think the general consensus was it was fine. It wasn't great. Like, there's not much else I can say. I'm not going to give you too many thoughts on this because that was basically my thoughts. It was fine. It was very forgettable considering the fact that I have forgotten about most of it already. I probably am not going to continue with this series. It is only a duology, but to be honest, now I've talked about it in this, it's probably going to go in my own haul pile, so long. But now we get to go from my lowest rated book of the month to my highest rated book of the month. Now you may say, Chloe, you've had so many 5-star books, how can you pick a highest rated book? Well, that's because it's a reread, and because if we're doing the core pile system, core pile, for anyone who doesn't know, is a scoring system which is created by G from Book Roast. It's basically a way of sort of breaking down your thoughts on a book into individual sections, and then that works out a overall star rating for you. Now I use this sometimes to sort of just gather my thoughts, but I tend to go on gut feelings more than using core pile. I mean, that last one I had to lower some of the points to get it to a 3-star on core pile. Did I say that was a 3-star? It was a 3-star. But I had to lower some of my ratings because it wasn't quite coming out what I wanted to. This one got a perfect 10 across the board, which works out as a 5-star, because this book, it's just, it has my heart. You've heard me talk about this before. I've already told you I reread it. I reread Babel by R.F. Kuang. So I read the ebook, the e-arc of this earlier on in the year, and I've had the physical copy now. I mean, I actually have 3 physical copies at this point, and I will have a 4th one by the end of the year, but this one was the first one I got. This was kindly gifted to me by the lovely Lisa. She won it at Yalk and then she gave it to me, and I love her for that because it meant that I got to tab this, and yes, that is a lot of tabs. Let's just take a minute to appreciate that. Like, it was basically just any moment where I was like, this is interesting, I love this. I'm like, I'm not going to look through them and sort of refer back to it for a talk. I just wanted to kind of see in visual representation, like, how excited my brain was reading this, and that's what those tabs are for. And I got to take this one to get it signed and personalised by R.F. Kuang earlier on this week, and she was very excited about the tabs. Actually, she said the teacher in her was very, very excited to see all of this, so I was happy. Yeah, it's a 5-star read, like I said. There's so much about this. So basically, let me tell you a synopsis. Babel, however you want to pronounce it. It's actually interesting that no one knows how to pronounce it because this whole book is about languages, and languages are weird. Basically, rundown for anyone who doesn't know, Babel is the English pronunciation, Babel is the American pronunciation. If you want the French pronunciation, it's Babel. So, you know, there's so many different versions of it. Basically, it tells the story of Robin, who is born in China, and he is then brought over to England when his mother passes away, and he's raised as a ward of this professor from Oxford University, and he ends up going to Oxford University to study translation, and that means that he's part of the Babel Society, which works to keep the country running with this magic that is basically, it's all to do with silver and translation, and that's what keeps the country running. And that's kind of like the basic premise of it. It's Robin going to Oxford and things that happen there, but there's so much more to it. There's a lot of talk about language and linguistics because obviously that is what he's studying, but there is a lot of talk about colonialism and empire as well, because in order to make this magic system work, you need people who can speak the other languages, and where else are you going to get those if you're British in the 1800s than going to the colonies and using people for your own accord? And I adore this book, so, in case you can't tell. It makes my brain tick in the best way possible. I love all the discussions in there, like the way that it makes me think about things, but I also really love the characters as well. Like, this is the thing with this book, it's a nice balance between being this sort of thought-provoking book, but also being something that connects, like, to the heart as well, because I adore these characters. There are moments in this book where things happen. R.F. Kuang books do tend to have some pain in them, and there are moments when things happen to these characters that like break me as a person, so I'm definitely connected, like, heart-wise, but like I said, also, like, I'm constantly thinking about everything that is discussed in here. There's also footnotes throughout it as well, so at times it is a bit textbook-like, but in the best possible way. I don't know if I'm doing the best to sell this, other than, like, just my excitement, but yeah, I've read this book twice now, and I loved it. I loved it more the second time reading it, so yeah, I love it. That's all I can say. I mean, if this isn't my favourite book of the year by December, I think we're all going to be very shocked. Although actually, I've just realised the sequel to this next one is going to be some competition potentially, because I have got pretty damn far in this series and there is only one left. and I'm a bit terrified of that fact. The next book that I read was Fool's Quest by Robin Hobb. So this is the 15th book in the Realm of the Elderlings. It is book number 2 in the Fitz and the Fool trilogy, which is the 5th series. And I can't give you a synopsis of this because we're so far in now, but basically, to tell you the very original synopsis for Assassin's Apprentice, like 14 books previously, Fitz is the bastard son of the Crown Prince. He's raised by his mother and his maternal grandfather until one day basically they've had enough and they say your dad can pay for you for a little bit. They leave him on the doorstep of the keep, and then his dad quickly abdicates the throne and runs away. So Fitz is left to be raised by the stable master, and it is just about Fitz's life and also about these 2 different magic systems that exist in this world, which is called the wit and the skill. One of which means that you can kind of use your mind to interact with other humans and do things to do with them. Another one means that you can interact with animals, and that one is looked down on a little bit more. And so much has happened since that, so that feels like ages ago, because there's a completely different storyline going on in this one, but I can't tell you because, like I said, it will spoil lots and lots of things. But I really love this book. Every time I read one of these Fitz books, the ones in between, like, I'm a little bit more hit and miss with, but the Fitz books are my favourites, and every time I read one I'm like, oh, this is my new favourite one. And that's what I did with this one. Like, middle books in a series tend a lot of times to be the worst ones. Hobb ones I actually really love because they tend to be so character focused, and I love these characters. So yeah, it was just a lot of Fitz, and I feel like there's a lot of stuff happening that you kind of wanted to happen all the way through. Some of it's really good, and that's only me into a false sense of security. There is also some awful stuff happening, and it's towards the end when Fitz kind of finds out about a lot of the stuff that's happening and things are now set in motion. And I'm really worried about the next one because the next one is the last one in the series, and I can't see Fitz surviving this series. It's not a spoiler, it's just the way his life goes, basically. His life is sad, and I can't see him getting through it all. I'm really worried about it, but I loved this book so much I gave it 5 stars. There we go. Okay, we do have one last book to talk about, which I also do not have to hold up because I read this one. Well, actually, no, I didn't read it on ebook. I ended up listening to the audiobook. It is Come Tumbling Down by Shauna Maguire. This is the 5th book in the Wayward Children series, and these are a set of novellas that are all about children who have found their way to other worlds. So think of Alice going through the rabbit hole into Wonderland. Basically, they always find a door that says Be Sure on it, and that door leads them to their other world. But for whatever reason, all of these children have found themselves back in the human world, and they're not really adjusting to the regular world too much, so they end up at a school which is called Eleanor West School for Wayward Children, and that is where we're at. So basically each of these stories kind of alternates between being in the school or being in the other world. This one is a little bit of both actually, and it revisits one of the worlds from earlier on in the series. Again, because it is quite far in, I'm not going to say too much about it because spoilers, but the world that this one was in, like I said, we've been in it before and it was one of my favourites, so I really liked parts of this. My only issue with this series is that I want more. These could be full-length novels and things just happened a bit too quick. I gave it 4 stars, but it could have so easily been a 5-star if it was just fleshed out a bit more. If it was a full-length book, this would have been a 5-star because I love Shauna Maguire's writing, I love the characters, I love the world. It's just not enough of it. That's all I have to say. Right, so that is everything. I thought this was going to be a much shorter video to film, but apparently not. But thank you guys for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff down below. Let me know what your favourite read was in the month of August, and I will see you guys next time with a new video. Bye.